The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. I stood in our kitchen at 2:13 a.m., motionless, staring at the shards of Daniel's favorite whiskey tumbler glittering across the hardwood floor. The one his grandfather had given him. I hadn't meant to drop it. My hands were just shaking too badly to hold on to anything. My phone still glowed on the counter where I'd set it down. The screen displayed a text from an unknown number. "He's not at work, Olivia." "You know that, right?" Outside, thunder rumbled as rain pounded against the windows. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Just kept hearing Daniel's voice from hours earlier. "Don't wait up, babe. Deadline emergency. Probably be at the office until midnight at least." It wasn't the first late night this month. Or the third. Or even the fifth. I knelt to pick up a shard of glass, not even flinching when it sliced my finger. The physical pain was almost a relief from the acid churning in my stomach. The question wasn't whether I believed the anonymous text. The question was whether I had the courage to find out for sure. 3 months earlier. "You should wear that blue dress," Daniel said, appearing behind me in the mirror as I stood in front of our closet. He wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "The one that makes your eyes look like the ocean." I smiled, leaning back against his chest. "You hate cocktail parties." "I do," he agreed, pressing his lips to my neck. "But I love showing you off." At 36, Daniel Reed was the kind of man who commanded attention without trying. Dark hair with premature silver at his temples, intelligent brown eyes, and a quiet confidence that came from building his architectural firm from nothing into one of the most respected boutique firms in Seattle. I'd met him 3 years ago when my PR agency was hired to handle publicity for one of his major projects. 6 months later, we were living together, and a year after that, married. "Besides," he continued, "the Morrison project is huge. If we land it, we'll need all hands on deck for the next year. Which means actual date nights will be endangered species," I finished for him, turning around in his arms. "I'll always make time for you," he promised, kissing my forehead. I believed him then. Daniel had always been intensely dedicated to his work, but somehow I'd never felt neglected. Until recently. The Morrison Commercial Complex was the biggest project his firm had ever bid on. For weeks, he'd been coming home later and later, sometimes not until after midnight. Even when he was home, he wasn't really present. He was constantly checking his phone, disappearing to take calls, or sitting at the dining room table surrounded by blueprints and models. "One more month until the bid is submitted," he'd promised 2 weeks ago. "Then things will get back to normal." But they hadn't. The cocktail party was at the home of Gregory Sinclair, one of the wealthiest property developers in the Pacific Northwest. His sprawling mansion overlooked Lake Washington, with floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to bring the water right into the living room. I sipped champagne and watched Daniel across the room, deep in conversation with a petite woman in her early 30s. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her black dress professional but still managing to highlight a figure that would make most women insecure. "That's Marina Chen," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Eliza, one of the architects from Daniel's firm. "Daniel's new project manager?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Eliza nodded. "She's brilliant. Worked for one of the top firms in New York before moving here. Daniel was lucky to get her." "He never mentioned she was so young," I said, immediately regretting how it sounded. Eliza gave me a strange look. He didn't hire her for her age. He hired her because she's the best. The Morrison project needs someone with her kind of vision and drive. I forced a smile, but something cold slithered through me as I watched Daniel laugh at something Marina said. He leaned closer to hear her over the music, his hand briefly touching her elbow in a gesture that could have been completely innocent. Should have been completely innocent. So why couldn't I tear my eyes away? Later that night, as we drove home in silence, I finally said what had been building inside me for hours. "You seem very comfortable with Marina." Daniel glanced at me, then back at the road. "She's easy to work with. Catches on quickly." "I'm sure she does," he frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, turning to stare out the passenger window at the city lights blurring in the rain. Just an observation. Olivia. His voice hardened just slightly. If you have something to say, just say it. You've been working late almost every night for weeks. You barely talk to me anymore except about work. And tonight I watched you with her. Jesus Christ, he muttered, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Are you seriously accusing me of something right now? Based on what? That I was talking to a colleague at a work function? Put that way, it did sound ridiculous. Paranoid. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't unravel. I miss you, I said finally, my voice smaller than I'd intended. I just miss you. Daniel's expression softened. He reached across the console to take my hand. I miss you too. But this project is make or break for the firm. You know that. I did know. Daniel had put everything into his company. His heart, his soul, his identity. It was part of what had attracted me to him. His passion, his drive. Just a few more weeks, he promised, squeezing my hand. Then we'll take a vacation. Anywhere you want to go. I smiled and squeezed back, ignoring the voice in my head that whispered, He's lying to you. By mid-July, Daniel was coming home so late that most nights I was already asleep. The alarm would wake me at 5:30 a.m. and he'd already be gone. We existed in the same house but barely saw each other. The Morrison bid is submitted next Friday, he told me during one of our rare dinners together. Then things will ease up. That's what you said last month, I pointed out, pushing my barely touched pasta around my plate. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, and I'm sorry. These last-minute design changes have been killing us. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it automatically. Let me guess, I said, setting down my fork. You have to go back to the office. He had the grace to look guilty. Marina found an issue with the environmental impact report. If we don't fix it tonight, Marina, I echoed. Of course, his jaw tightened. Don't start, Olivia. She's working just as hard as I am on this. I'm sure she is. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Daniel pushed back from the table. I'm not doing this again. Not tonight. Doing what? Having an actual conversation with your wife? Defending myself against accusations you won't even say out loud. His voice rose, then he took a deep breath, visibly pulling himself back under control. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, reasonable. I'm working, Olivia. That's it. That's all this is. I wanted to believe him. But something had changed between us. Something I couldn't quite name. A new distance. A coldness in moments that used to be warm. You don't look at me the same way anymore, I said quietly. He stared at me for a long moment. I don't even know what that means. Yes, you do. I met his gaze steadily. You just don't want to admit it. Daniel shook his head, collected his keys and jacket. I'll be back by midnight. He wasn't. 2 days later, I was having lunch with my best friend Tasha in a small cafe downtown. You're being paranoid, she said after I explained my suspicions. Daniel adores you. He's not cheating. Then why does he get so defensive when I ask about work? Why is he constantly texting at all hours? Why can't he look me in the eye anymore? Tasha sipped her iced tea thoughtfully. Because he's stressed about the biggest project of his career, and his wife is accusing him of having an affair instead of supporting him? Put that way, I felt horrible, self-centered, insecure. You know what your problem is? Tasha continued not unkindly. Ever since your dad walked out on your mom, you've been waiting for history to repeat itself. You expect men to leave, so you look for signs they're about to. I flinched. Tasha knew me too well, had known me since college. She'd been there through all my failed relationships, the pattern of sabotage I couldn't seem to break. Always expecting the worst, always finding it. Daniel is not your father, she said gently. And you're not your mother. I know that, I said defensively. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're so afraid he'll leave that you're pushing him away. That night, I tried to see things differently. When Daniel called to say he'd be late again, I didn't argue. When he finally came home after 11 p.m., I greeted him with a glass of wine and a kiss instead of an interrogation. "What's this for?" he asked, surprised. "For working so hard," I said. "I'm proud of you." Something flickered in his eyes. Relief? Guilt? And then he smiled, pulling me close. "Thank you for understanding. For 2 weeks, I tried to be the supportive wife. I stopped questioning his late nights, stopped checking his phone when he was in the shower, stopped watching for signs. But the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. Because while I was trying to be more trusting, Daniel was pulling away even further. The few times we did have dinner together, he was distracted, checking his watch, barely engaging in conversation. Twice I caught him whispering on the phone in our bathroom, the shower running to mask his voice. And there was something else. Something that sent ice through my veins when I finally noticed it. His wedding ring. He'd started taking it off. "He's not at work, Olivia." "You know that, right?" I stared at the anonymous text message, my heart hammering. It was 11:45 p.m., and Daniel had left for the office nearly 6 hours ago. With trembling fingers, I called his cell. Straight to voicemail. I called his office line. No answer there either. I paced our living room, the hardwood cool beneath my bare feet. Through the windows, Seattle's lights blurred in the rain, creating halos that expanded and contracted with each drop on the glass. This was crazy. I was overreacting. There were perfectly innocent explanations. His phone had died. He'd gone out with colleagues after finishing up. He was stuck in traffic. But at nearly midnight? On a Thursday? Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and raincoat. The garage was cold and damp as I slid into my car, the leather seat chilling me through my thin pajama pants. I hadn't even bothered to change. Daniel's office was downtown, a 15-minute drive this time of night. As I navigated the rain-slicked streets, doubts bombarded me. What was I doing? Spying on my husband? Becoming the very thing I was afraid of. A paranoid, distrustful woman who couldn't believe in the man she married? The parking lot of his office building was nearly empty. No sign of his sleek black Audi. The security guard in the lobby confirmed what I already knew. "Mr. Reed?" "No, ma'am, he left around 6:30. Said he was heading home." I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, staring at nothing. Where was he? If not at work, then where? "You know where," whispered a voice in my head. Marina Chen's address wasn't hard to find. A luxury apartment building in Capitol Hill, not far from Daniel's office. I parked across the street and waited, my windshield wipers pushing back the rain in a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. "What are you doing here?" I asked myself. "What are you going to do if you see him?" I didn't know. I just knew I had to see for myself. Had to know. An hour passed. Then another. Nothing. No sign of Daniel's car. No movement at the building's entrance. Just rain and distant thunder and my own thoughts eating me alive. At 2 a.m., I finally gave up and drove home, exhausted and ashamed of myself. He wasn't there either. It was only when I was pouring myself a glass of whiskey, his whiskey, that my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Crashed at office. Models all wrong. Working through night. Sorry." I stared at the message, the glass slipping from my numb fingers to shatter on the floor. He was lying. I knew he was lying, but why? The next morning, Daniel came home before I left for work, looking exhausted but wired, like someone running on caffeine and adrenaline. He kissed my cheek absently, not seeming to notice my red-rimmed eyes or the fact that I flinched at his touch. "Big presentation today," he said, heading for the shower. "The Morrison people are coming in. This is it, the moment of truth." I watched him move around our bedroom, selecting a fresh shirt, his favorite tie, the navy blue one I'd given him for his birthday. So normal. So familiar. "I called your office last night," I said finally, around midnight. He paused, his back to me. "I was probably in the conference room. We spread out all the models there. The security guard said you left at 6:30. Now he turned, his face carefully neutral. "I went to grab dinner with the team, then we came back." "Which restaurant?" "What? Which restaurant did you go to?" His eyes narrowed. What is this, an interrogation? I'm just asking a simple question, Daniel. We went to that Italian place near the office. Rossini's. He turned away, buttoning his shirt. Why does it matter? It doesn't, I said quietly. I just wonder why they told me you'd left for the day. For whom? Daniel sighed heavily, turning back to face me. The guard probably got confused. There were a lot of people coming and going yesterday. He crossed the room to take my hands. Olivia, please. Today is huge for us. I need your support, not... Whatever this is. I looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. He met my gaze steadily, but there was something there. A wariness, a distance that hadn't existed before. I love you, he said, squeezing my hands. You know that, right? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Tonight we'll celebrate, he promised. Win or lose, I'm all yours. But he wasn't, and maybe he hadn't been for a long time. I tried to focus on work that day, but my mind kept circling back to Daniel, to the lie I'd caught him in. Small perhaps, explainable perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the same one as the night before. Did you check on him last night? He wasn't at the office. My hand shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Someone who thinks you deserve to know the truth. What truth? I replied, tonight, p.m. Fairmont Olympic Hotel, room 412. See for yourself. I stared at my phone, my mouth dry. Was this some kind of sick joke? A trap? Or was someone genuinely trying to help me? By 7:30 p.m., I was sitting in my car outside the Fairmont, one of Seattle's most elegant hotels. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the streetlights. I watched well-dressed couples entering the hotel, laughing, holding hands. Normal people living normal lives without this sickness churning in their stomachs. At 7:50, I finally got out of the car. The Fairmont's lobby was all old-world luxury, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, plush carpets. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Room 412 was at the end of a long corridor. I stood before the door, paralyzed. Walk away, a voice in my head urged. Whatever is on the other side of that door, you can't unsee it. But I couldn't walk away, not now. I needed to know. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could touch the wood, the door opened. I stumbled back, expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. Not the woman who stood there, gray-haired, elegantly dressed, and completely unfamiliar. Mrs. Reed? She asked, her voice cultured calm. I'm Eleanor Morrison. Please come in. Morrison, as in the Morrison commercial complex? I followed her into a suite that overlooked the city, my confusion mounting. I apologize for the cloak and dagger, she said, gesturing for me to sit on one of the cream-colored sofas. But I needed to speak with you privately, and I wasn't sure you'd agree if you knew who I was. I don't understand, I said, perched on the edge of the sofa. What is this about? Your husband, she said, sitting across from me, and his firm's bid on our project. I stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. What about it? It's exceptional, she said simply. Truly visionary work. The committee was unanimous. Reed Architects will be awarded the contract. Relief flooded me, followed immediately by more confusion. That's wonderful news. But why are you telling me instead of Daniel? Eleanor Morrison studied me, her eyes sharp and assessing. Because I need to know what kind of man I'm going into business with. And lately I've heard concerning things. My stomach dropped. What kinds of things? That he's been meeting with representatives from our biggest competitor. That he's been sharing details of our requirements, our budget. She leaned forward. That he may be playing both sides against the middle. I shook my head, disbelieving. No, Daniel wouldn't do that. He's worked too hard for this project. It means everything to him. Does it? She reached for a folder on the coffee table between us, extracted several photographs. These were taken 2 nights ago, and the night before that. With trembling hands, I took the photos. They showed Daniel entering a different hotel, the Four Seasons. And he wasn't alone. Marina Chen was with him. Industrial espionage is a serious matter, Mrs. Reed, Eleanor continued, her voice gentle now. But before we took any action, I wanted to speak with you directly, to see if you knew anything about this. I couldn't tear my eyes from the photographs. Daniel and Marina, her hand on his arm, both of them smiling as they walked into the hotel. Another of them in the hotel bar, heads bent close together over drinks. Nothing explicitly damning, nothing that proved they were lovers, but nothing that disproved it either. I don't understand, I said again, my voice barely audible. Why would you think I knew anything about this? Eleanor sighed. Because in my experience, wives usually know when something isn't right. Even if they don't want to admit it to themselves. I looked up at her, suddenly seeing the situation clearly. You sent those texts. You've been watching him. She didn't deny it. We've invested too much in this project to risk it being compromised. We needed to know who we were dealing with. And who is that exactly? I asked, anger finally cutting through my shock. Because the Daniel Reed I know would never sell out his clients. Never. Eleanor studied me, then nodded slightly, as if coming to a decision. I believe you. And I hope you're right about him. She took back the photographs. The contract will be officially announced tomorrow. We're giving Daniel Reed the benefit of the doubt. But you're warning me, I said slowly. Let's just say I'm sharing information, professional to professional. What you do with it is up to you. She stood, indicating our meeting was over. And Mrs. Reed, I'd appreciate your discretion regarding this conversation. I left the hotel in a daze, the images of Daniel and Marina burning in my mind. It wasn't proof of an affair, I told myself. Business meetings happen in hotels all the time, but the lies, the secrecy, the late nights that weren't spent at his office after all, something wasn't right. And I needed to know what. Daniel called around 9:30 p.m., his voice jubilant. We got it, he exclaimed. The Morrison contract is ours. That's amazing, I managed, trying to sound genuinely happy. Congratulations. We're celebrating at Giovanni's. The whole team is here. Come join us. Giovanni's was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters in bow ties. By the time I arrived, the celebration was in full swing, champagne flowing, laughter spilling across the room. Daniel saw me immediately, his face lighting up. He crossed the room to wrap me in a hug, lifting me slightly off my feet. There she is, he said proudly to his team. The woman who put up with me through this whole crazy process. Marina Chen stood near the table, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. She was beautiful in a simple black dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Olivia, she said, stepping forward with a smile. So glad you could join us. Your husband is a genius, you know that? I do, I said, forcing myself to smile back. Up close, she was even more striking. High cheekbones, perfect skin, intelligent eyes. The kind of woman who turned heads without trying. The kind of woman my husband might fall for. Throughout dinner, I watched them together. The way Daniel leaned in when Marina spoke. The easy laughter they shared. The shorthand communication of people who'd spent long hours working closely together. There was nothing inappropriate. Nothing I could point to and say, there, that proves it. And yet the knot in my stomach only tightened. After dinner, as we were waiting for our cars, Marina touched Daniel's arm briefly. Don't forget our meeting tomorrow, she said. 9 sharp, on a Saturday? I asked, keeping my voice light. Daniel glanced at me, then back at Marina. Just tying up loose ends before the real work begins, he explained. Marina smiled. Exactly. We've got a lot of ground to cover. She turned to me. Your husband's quite the perfectionist, you know. Won't rest until everything is exactly right. Yes, I said quietly. I know. On the drive home, Daniel was animated, excited, talking about the project, the 2-year timeline, the challenges ahead. I nodded in the right places, made appropriate sounds of interest, all while Eleanor Morrison's warning echoed in my head. You're quiet, he said finally, glancing at me as we pulled into our driveway. "Everything okay?" I looked at him, my husband, the man I'd loved for 3 years, trusted with my heart, my future. The man who now felt like a stranger. "Just tired," I lied, the irony not lost on me. "It's been a long week." He nodded, accepting this without question. "Let's get some sleep," he said, squeezing my hand. Tomorrow's a new day, but as I lay beside him that night, listening to his even breathing, I knew that tomorrow wouldn't be just another day. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth. I followed him the next morning. Daniel left just before 9 a.m., dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. "Meeting shouldn't take more than a couple of hours," he told me, kissing my cheek. "Thought we could grab lunch afterward? Maybe take a drive out to that winery you like?" "Sounds perfect," I said, smiling as if my world wasn't crumbling around me. I waited 5 minutes after he left, then took my car, keeping a safe distance behind his Audi. The morning was bright and clear, the rain finally gone, Mount Rainier visible in the distance like a painting too perfect to be real. Daniel drove straight to his office building downtown. I parked across the street, watching as he entered. Through the glass lobby, I could see him greeting the weekend security guard, then disappearing into the elevator. 10 minutes later, Marina arrived, stylish even in weekend clothes, sleek black pants, a cream blouse, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. They really were having a meeting. A legitimate, professional Saturday morning meeting. Just as Daniel had said, I felt sick with relief and then immediately sick with shame. What was I doing? Spying on my husband like some unhinged, jealous stereotype? I was about to leave, to drive home and try to forget this whole sordid episode, when I saw them exit the building together. They walked to Daniel's car, got in, and drove off. Before I could think better of it, I was following them again. They headed north, out of the city center, toward the residential neighborhoods of Queen Anne Hill. I kept several cars between us, my heart hammering, telling myself there could be a perfectly innocent explanation. They were going to meet another colleague, or to see a potential building site. Or Daniel's Audi pulled up outside a small, charming craftsman house painted a soft blue with white trim. A for sale sign stood in the neatly manicured front lawn. I parked half a block away, watching as Daniel and Marina got out of the car and approached the house. A woman in a blazer, a real estate agent I realized, was waiting for them on the porch. She shook hands with both of them, then unlocked the door, ushering them inside. They were looking at a house. Together. I sat in my car, unable to move, unable to think clearly. What did this mean? Were they planning to move in together? Was this the final piece of evidence I'd been dreading? 20 minutes passed before they emerged. Daniel had his arm around Marina's shoulders, both of them smiling broadly as the real estate agent locked up behind them. They stood talking on the sidewalk for a few minutes, then the agent left in her own car. Daniel and Marina remained, standing close together, his hand still resting on her shoulder as they looked back at the house. Then, to my horror, he pulled her into a tight hug. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't look away. When they finally separated and got back into Daniel's car, I didn't follow. I didn't need to see more. I drove home on autopilot, tears blurring my vision, narrowly avoiding an accident when I ran a red light without even noticing. Inside our house, the house I'd thought was our forever home, I moved from room to room like a ghost, touching Daniel's things, our wedding photos, the life we'd built, all a lie. By the time Daniel returned home 2 hours later, I was sitting at our dining room table, surrounded by printed copies of the photographs Eleanor Morrison had shown me. "Olivia?" he called as he entered. "You home? Sorry I'm late, but wait until you hear—" He stopped short in the doorway, taking in the scene. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You're the one who's been lying." He approached slowly, glancing at the photographs, confusion creasing his brow. "What are these? Where did you get them?" "Does it matter? They're real, aren't they?" I gestured to the images of him and Marina entering the Four Seasons. This wasn't work. None of it was work. Daniel sank into a chair across from me, rubbing his face with both hands. When he looked up, his expression was pained. "It's not what you think, Olivia." "Don't," I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Don't insult me with more lies. I saw you today at that house with her. I saw you." He stared at me, realization dawning. "You followed me?" "Jesus, Olivia. You were house hunting with your girlfriend," I said, my voice breaking. "Were you going to tell me before or after you moved in together?" To my shock, Daniel laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Is that what you think? That I'm leaving you for Marina? Aren't you?" I demanded, anger flaring through my grief. The late nights, the lies, the secret meetings. "For God's sake, Olivia, she's my sister." The words hung in the air between us, incomprehensible. "What?" I whispered. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, his gaze steady on mine. "Marina is my half-sister. Same father, different mothers. She found me 6 months ago." I stared at him, unable to process his words. No, that can't be right. You don't have a sister." "You're an only child." "I thought I was," he said quietly, "until Marina contacted me. She had DNA evidence, old photos, my father's letters to her mother. It's true, Olivia. She's my sister. But..." I struggled to make sense of it all. "Why keep it a secret? Why lie to me?" Daniel sighed heavily. "Because it's complicated. Marina was born while my father was still married to my mother. He had an affair, Marina was the result, and he never acknowledged her. Never supported her or her mother. She grew up knowing who her father was, but he refused to have anything to do with her. I remembered what Daniel had told me about his father, a successful businessman who died when Daniel was in college. He'd spoken of him with respect, even reverence. "You worshipped your father," I said slowly. "I did," Daniel admitted. "And finding out he was capable of this, that he abandoned his own daughter." He shook his head. "It's been hard to reconcile with the man I thought I knew." "The house," I said, trying to piece it all together. "Why were you looking at a house with her?" For the first time, Daniel smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "It's a surprise. Was supposed to be, anyway." He reached across the table to take my hand. "It's for us, Olivia. Our new home." I pulled my hand away, still wary. "I don't understand. The Morrison contract is huge, life-changing. With the money from that, we can afford the home we've always wanted. The one with enough room for a family." His voice softened. "I know we've been talking about trying for a baby. I wanted to surprise you with the perfect place to raise our children. But why take Marina? Why all the secrecy? She's in real estate on the side, did you know that? She has connections, found this place before it even hit the market. And she knows me well enough now to help narrow down the search." He paused. "As for the secrecy, I was trying to surprise you. And I was still figuring out how to tell you about Marina, about who she really is." "The hotel," I said, pointing to the photographs. "You were at the Four Seasons with her." "Multiple times," Daniel nodded. "Marina lives in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. Not exactly private for the kind of conversations we needed to have. So we met in hotel lobbies, restaurants, places where we could talk without being overheard. It made sense. Or it could make sense if I let myself believe it. But there were still too many unanswered questions." "Why did you take off your wedding ring?" I asked, my voice small. Daniel looked genuinely confused. "I haven't..." He glanced down at his left hand, where his wedding band gleamed in the afternoon light. "I always wear it, Olivia. Always. I saw you without it. Multiple times," understanding dawned on his face. "The 3D printer," he said. "When I'm working with the 3D printer, I have to take it off. The resin we use can damage metal, leave permanent marks. I've been using the printer a lot lately for the Morrison models. It was such a simple, logical explanation. Was I really that paranoid? That insecure? What about Eleanor Morrison?" I asked, grasping at the last thread of my suspicions. "She thinks you're sharing confidential information with competitors." Daniel's eyes widened. "Eleanor, what? When did you speak to her?" I told him about our meeting at the Fairmont, about her concerns, her warnings. With each word, his expression grew more incredulous. "That's insane," he said when I finished. "I've never shared a single detail of the Morrison project with anyone outside my team. Why would I? This is the biggest opportunity of my career." "Then why does she think you have?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "Wait, the night before last, I was meeting with Eleanor's nephew, James Morrison. He's joining the family business, wanted to discuss some preliminary ideas for the project. That was at the Four Seasons. You met with James Morrison and Marina at the same time?" I asked, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle. "Yes. I'm trying to bring Marina out of the shadows, introduce her to the family connections she's been denied all her life. James is around her age, they hit it off." He shook his head. "But Eleanor doesn't know about Marina yet. Doesn't know she's a Morrison by blood. I was waiting until the contract was finalized before having that conversation." I sat back, overwhelmed. Could it all really be this innocent? This different from what I'd imagined? Daniel came around the table, kneeling beside my chair. "Olivia, look at me." When I did, his eyes were serious, sincere. "I have never cheated on you. I would never cheat on you. You are everything to me." "Then why didn't you tell me about Marina?" I asked, needing to understand. "Why keep something so important a secret?" He sighed. "At first, I needed to be sure she was telling the truth. By the time I was convinced we were deep into the Morrison bid and adding this complication..." He shook his head. "I handled it badly. I see that now. I was trying to protect my father's memory, protect you from my family's mess, and all I did was make you doubt me." "I want to meet her," I said suddenly. "Marina, I want to hear her side of this." Daniel nodded. "Of course. She's been wanting to meet you properly, too. She feels terrible about all this." I stood up, needing space, air, time to think. "I need to process this, Daniel. It's a lot to take in." "I know," he said, rising to his feet but not touching me. "Take all the time you need." "But Olivia?" "I love you. Only you. Always you." I looked at him, my husband, suddenly a stranger and yet still the man I knew. The man who'd been carrying a burden I hadn't even suspected. "I believe you," I said finally, and realized with surprise that I did. 3 days later, I sat across from Marina Chen in a quiet corner of a cafe, studying her face for any resemblance to my husband. It was there, subtle but unmistakable, the same shape to their eyes, the same slight dimple in the left cheek when they smiled. "I never meant to come between you and Daniel," she said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "When I found out about him, I'd spent my whole life knowing I had a brother somewhere, knowing my father had another family, a real family he acknowledged." "And your mother?" I asked gently. Marina's smile was sad. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. That's what finally pushed me to find Daniel. Life is so short, you know. Too short for unfinished business." I nodded, understanding that impulse all too well. "I should have insisted Daniel tell you from the beginning," Marina continued. "But he was so protective of his father's memory, so conflicted. And then there was the Morrison project." "The irony of that isn't lost on me," I said. "You turning out to be a Morrison by blood," she laughed softly. "Life is strange that way, isn't it? I grew up hearing stories about my grandfather, this business titan who never knew I existed. And now here I am, connected to his legacy after all." We talked for hours. Marina sharing stories of her childhood in New York, her move to Seattle for a fresh start, the shock of discovering that her half-brother was not just in the same city, but in the same industry. By the time we parted, I felt something I hadn't expected, a genuine liking for this woman who was now, improbably, my sister-in-law. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she said as we stood to leave. "I know how this all must have looked to you. Like my husband was having an affair," I admitted with a rueful smile. Marina's expression turned serious. "He loves you so much, Olivia. Every time he talks about you, his whole face changes. I hope someday I find someone who looks at me the way Daniel looks at you." That night, as Daniel and I lay in bed, I finally asked the question that had been nagging at me. Who sent me those anonymous texts? The ones telling me you weren't at work? Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me. I think I know. There's an architect at the firm, Victor Lanier. He was pushing for the project lead position that went to Marina. He's been resentful ever since, looking for ways to undermine her. And you, I pointed out. And me, Daniel agreed. He probably saw us together, jumped to the same conclusion you did, and thought he could cause trouble. I traced the line of his jaw with my fingertips. I'm sorry I doubted you. Don't be, he said, catching my hand and pressing a kiss to my palm. I gave you every reason to. The secrecy, the late nights, the evasiveness. If our positions were reversed, I probably would have thought the same thing. Still, I said, I should have trusted you more. Daniel smiled, the same smile that had made me fall in love with him 3 years ago. We both made mistakes. The important thing is where we go from here. And where we went was forward, together. The following weekend, Daniel took me to see the Blue Craftsman house, still for sale, still perfect. We walked from room to room, Daniel pointing out features, describing his vision for our future there. This could be a nursery, he said, showing me a sun-filled bedroom overlooking the backyard. And there's space downstairs for a home office for you. I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steadiness of his presence. I love it, I said simply. 2 weeks later, our offer was accepted. That night, as we celebrated with champagne on our balcony, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and pink, Daniel took my hand. There's something else I need to tell you, he said, his expression serious. Something I've been keeping from you. My heart skipped a beat, old fears momentarily resurfacing. What is it? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small black velvet box. I know we're already married, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning sapphire ring. But after everything that's happened, I wanted to renew our promises to each other. No more secrets, no more doubts. Tears filled my eyes as he slipped the ring onto my finger, where it nestled perfectly beside my wedding band. For better or for worse, he said softly. In truth and in trust. In truth and in trust, I echoed, leaning in to kiss him as the last light of day faded from the sky. Later that night, as Daniel slept beside me, I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything. How one misunderstanding, fueled by insecurity and poor communication, had nearly destroyed the life we'd built. But perhaps we needed that crisis, that moment of near destruction, to build something stronger. Something based not on blind faith or untested assumptions, but on hard-won understanding and deliberate choice. In the darkness, I touched my new ring, feeling its weight, its solidity. A reminder that sometimes what you think you see isn't the whole truth, that following someone doesn't always lead where you expect, and that what changes everything isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's forgiveness, understanding, and the courage to believe in love, even when fear tells you not to.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.